All right, call to order, pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
United States of America, Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, and justice for all.
Dana, please do the roll call.
Mr. Bordenero,
Here.
Mr. Fernandez,
Here,
Mr. Grady,
Here.
Mr. Holmes,
Here.
Mr. Lamaglio, Mr. Paradis,
Here.
Vice Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Any public comments? Moving on, approval of prior minutes. Motion to accept prior minutes.
Make a motion to accept the approval requirement.
A second,
Second.
discussion, corrections. Hearing none, those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
aye,
Moving on to new business. I have someone move item number 1.
Move to transfer $206,000 as detailed in the company's spreadsheet to cover higher than budget expenditures in the identified accounts.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Anything in particular you'd like to point out, Mr. Delaney, or just all regular recurring stuff? Look pretty pro forma to me.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would point out, some of the overtime at least was driven by the car break-ins that are not unique to Berlin, but the police commission did ask the chief if he could dedicate extra officers on shift, so we could keep an additional eye on it. Whether that's had an influence or not, it seems like based on the chief's recent updates to the council, there's been an improvement. So that continues.
Those, one question, in the,
No.
on school, what does LAP stand for? I don't know what that means. LAP? Just don't know what that means.
Oh, lower lap rate, that's our liability,
Oh,
so property casualty.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have a motion on item number 2.
Move to approve the transfer of $70,000 from the building renovations account to the shop equipment account and capital non-recurring fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Motion carries. Item number 3.
Move to approve the transfer of $27,500 from the contingency account to the transfer to other funds account, both in the general fund.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4.
Move to appropriate $2,210,640 of FY22 general fund, unassigned fund balance to the pension actuarial funding account within the general fund.
Is there a second? Discussion? Those in favor?
aye,
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5.
Move to appropriate $189 for state Connecticut Youth Services grant, for the youth grant percentage account in the general fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to review the pro forma financials for the VHS lighting upgrade project. Over to you.
Yeah, last meeting, we'll have UMass for it. These are the financials. I will tell you, we have not signed. The way the process works is we said we are interested, we'd like to move forward. The consultant then takes all of the information fed into these financials, proposes it to Eversource, and they have to accept. So until they come back with the approval from Eversource and the final numbers, the town manager hasn't signed the thing. So based on these financials, conservatively, it pays for itself. Payback is less than 2 years. It's an opportunity for the lights to be off at night or even when you have events in some parts of the building, having the lights down and others. Schools collectively cost about $800,000 to $900,000 for electricity annually. Berlin High being the biggest consumer of that electricity, so this was the area we really focused on, and I think that the town manager agrees, facility director agreed, and the council approved this on the idea that a 2-year payback to save when you're spending close to $500,000 a year on electricity, we can substantially reduce that and have better control over it. It was a worthwhile investment for the town. There's no initial cash outlay for the construction, so we'll be repaying it if we move forward with on-bill financing at 0% financed by Eversource.
It's something that's off school time.
Doesn't have to be, they've done this in a number of schools. Each of the vendors reference different schools. This one happened to be just more on the project in Simsbury, doing the same thing. They can do it at night, they can do other things and do it in parts. So they do accommodate that. Our goal is, this was the first one. McGee was also one that we have preliminary numbers on. Town Hall is another, as well as the Library Community Center. The economics would have to be the same. This was where we felt like in the short term, we have to get in this calendar year to get the full benefit from Eversource. We're going to focus it on EHS. And the facilities director said if I have to focus my attention, that's what I'm talking about.
Was this something, eventually we'll make the budget adjustments accordingly? I want to be able to say, these are the segments, let's incorporate in our budget, so at least we help people, help economists with this.
Absolutely.
Solar project, huh?
Well, I mean, we gotta adjust budgets. when
Just
we-
saying. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
It's a good deal.
Well, when we saw the numbers, we actually went back to
That's what makes me nervous.
Yeah.
and that's why until,
That can't be true.
until the Eversource proposal comes back with those numbers, we see it, nothing has been signed. We agreed to move forward, but we're not obligated. So if something were to change, say, oops, we miscalculated this, or it's really not going to play out this way, the town manager has to be the way, and I won't sign it.
Is that something to change in the incentive, is that what you're saying?
It could potentially, if they, if it takes too long, some of the incentives could go wrong. At this point, these are the numbers, and this is what we get back from Eversource. We want to go forward, and try to take advantage of it as soon as possible.
I will say being on this board, I can't tell you how many people ask, why the lights on? Everybody asks, everybody. Old, young, parents, why the lights on all night?
It's not just the high school. I drive by McGee on my way home here at night from the meetings. And every single light in that parking lot is on. So there's really nobody that can go around at night before they leave and turn off the lights. I mean, janitors did that for decades. They turned off the lights when they left. It can't be that complicated. Apparently it is. Have to spend over $1 million to put in a computer system that turns off the light. Stranger than true.
All right, anything else on that item? Item number 7, selection of a Board of Finance member to participate on the Community/Senior Center Committee.
Oh, thank you.
Imagine there'll be lots of people.
I'll do it.
Is there actually a committee?
There's a committee being formed, the council, they were going to take it up at the last meeting. They deferred it in part so that you guys could meet and come forward with a name.
I'm glad to hear that.
I nominate.
I think
Jim Grady.
you- I think-
Do I have a second?
I think you'll be good for it.
Yeah. Well, Mary Ann's a big swimmer, so.
I think it's,
She kind of goaded me.
it's a massive project. And it's gonna take a lot of comment and need a lot of input. So, yeah, why don't you made a motion?
I made a motion to nominate Tim Grady for the Community Senior Center.
Second.
Any discussion or whatever? Those in favor? Aye.
If you guys haven't, there is really a great presentation from QA&M. These consultants put together on the county website. There's a link to it from the main page on the county website. Whether you agree or disagree with it or sticker shock.
Is
Really, really.
yeah, is there a forecast for the annual operation cost?
Very
Of the-
preliminary,
Uh,
in the neighborhood of $3 million. That's very preliminary.
That's, yeah.
It's 24/7, 365, you gotta watch it.
Three pools.
yeah,
You're gonna hire an entire staff, lifeguards, maintenance, facilities, upkeep, grounds.
And it's a 1.6 acre building, so it's not gonna be cheap.
Right now, the
It's-
preliminary numbers for QA&M are about $36 million.
With a error range of 10%, or almost $4 million.
That's
No,
I'm not saying that, I was saying the
not a
video,
chance.
never.
the presentation, when you look at it, it's a really nice building.
It's
beautiful. Really nice.
It was a beautiful building, but the reality of things is, I think we could trim it back and make it so that people will go for it, have a nice building. Or we can watch a beautiful palace without it flames with the boat motor. I saw the presentation at the high school. It's grand corridor, the giant gyms. I looked at it.
Between Sage Park Road and the convenience. You have indoor and outdoor, it's gorgeous.
Yeah,
So what's the next step in this, in the process?
My understanding is the council will, not sure how to do it, but create the committee. I believe Donna Bovee from Parks and Rec, Tim will be on. The council's supposed to place someone on. I don't know who that person will be. There'll be some other members, and then they're gonna pull in staff as needed. So. That was the financial aspect of it. Could be, yeah. I don't know. So next Tuesday, they're supposed to do that, so I will let Roche know that Tim is the finance person. And we'll go from there, and then I think, I believe there is a meeting at the senior center. Next Tuesday, we're supposed to get another forum.
yeah, there's one at the senior center.
And from there, the community, I think, has to try to incorporate a lot of the feedback, try to talk like said, maybe it's scaling back, trying to figure out, gauge the public, how.
There's other options too. There's a couple of, well, I know there's one private. Working together, that may be the best option.
so I have a question. I'm sure you guys must know, but how do we get here? Like, who discussed this project? Who went and decided to hire these people to design the project? Like, how this all started?
This was identified, I'm not sure who initially identified it, but it was identified publicly by the former Speaker of the House. And he came forward while he was still Speaker. Joe was able to secure a $750,000 grant from the state for planning and a lot of the work that we're doing now. So we're actually paying for QA&M, the consultants, through that state grant. The work we're doing right now, potentially future bond drafting and those types of things, we would incorporate through that. So that's kind of how we're at this stage as far as the next step.
But then Raul, it goes to PVC. So that's really where everything runs out of.
Okay, well, thank you for stepping up and to keep us up on it. Okay. Representing us there.
Well, I think you do have the ball permission, so somebody else had a mic.
Finance Director update.
Just a couple of updates. Obviously, you approved, thank you, the non-budgeted appropriation tonight. Since this was brought forward to the council, 2 folks in the police department have announced their retirement, chief, as well as Mark Sonison. So both will be retiring on June 30th. There will be a town, it's a town meeting, it's the official word, next Tuesday night, and then the council will vote, assuming meeting that it's approved, to appropriate $3.1 million more. With the chief and Mark retiring, we're down to 5 active people. However, once they retire, they will use up the money you just appropriated tonight. So the good news is our liability is coming down, and we have the money in savings to make these non-budget appropriations. Many towns have to go out and bond and borrow for an extended number of years to pay off their liability. We're down to 5, and it's highly likely anywhere from 1 to 3 of the remaining 5 will retire this calendar year, and that's why I'm asking for the additional money. Could be wrong on that, I know, based on indications, who's asked for their numbers, different things on the horizon, and I think a couple things, how they play out may dictate what happens with those folks. But I will be, assuming the council passes it next meeting, coming back to you at the August 3rd to request another $3.1 million into the fund. But like I said, I think many towns are envious of the fact that we're getting out of the pension and paying it off. We're not deferring it, we're not bonding, extending it through debt. That said, there are discussions going on still about potentially resurrecting the defined benefit plan for the police department. Pure discussions, there's nothing formal to put forward. That would follow the typical benefits process, which would mean the town manager would have to bring it forward. Excuse me. It's really for him to initiate, and then the council would adopt a change to the pension plan if that decision were made. So, wanted to let you know that. Work is ongoing from the 2% fund money. So council agenda next Tuesday will include.
Before we leave pensions, is there any downside to waiting? You said the 3.1, you don't need it right now, but it's going to be possibly. Is there a downside to waiting until we know what the number is?
The downside is that if any of those 3 decide to retire in July, excuse me, we'd have to have an emergency meeting. What happens is the valuation is based on the treasury rate, the first day of the month following the retire. So the 2 officers who retired July 30th will be on August 1st. So around the 15th of August, they will get their official numbers, they sign, it goes back, and then eventually pay them. In the event anybody retires in July without having the money in the bank, we have to have an emergency meeting for finance in order to, and if the council rejected an emergency meeting with the council and the board of finance, you have to notice that we can hold the meeting, make sure you have a quorum, and then choose to do that, and then I'd have to send the money over. So with that narrow gap, that's why I was coming forward, is to make sure that we have funding in place. I anticipate that this calendar year, like I said, 1 to 3. I think 1 is more imminent. There is a police post-retirement health insurance fund that officers have paid into, the town hasn't paid any money into. And we're moving that to individual plans through ICMA, who handles our retirement account. And once that settles, there will be at least 1 who will choose to retire. My understanding is pretty likely that someone's waiting for that. That is imminent. All of the information has been sent to ICMA. Once the accounts are set up, we will send the money over. So it is more than a 50-50 chance that that person will return the paperwork by July 1st. And then we kind of stuff in all of this stuff. And for each of these people, you're looking at, depending on the individual, you're looking at anywhere from $1 million to $1.6 million individually. So that's why I'm for the money.
Now, that action will trigger a town meeting.
We have to call the town meeting before the council meeting because it's a non-budget appropriation in excess of $250,000 requires a town meeting approval. recent history has shown that the town meeting is participated by the council. Nobody else has really participated and voted.
So we actually have the town meeting. All right, well, no, the council's approved it, we'll approve this and then.
No, the town meeting happens before the council. 6:45 next Tuesday, they've already called the town meeting. So at 6:45, the meeting will happen. And then assuming that it's approved, it will be on the council agenda to approve. And then if they approve, it will come to you. Obviously.
6:48 will be over.
That long?
And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about it.
and,
So they're gonna read the item that does.
you know, as we look at the bigger economy with, you know, all the inflation fears and everything, and we talk about rising rates, does that have any possible impact on when someone would put their papers in? Wouldn't higher rates be beneficial to not holding off? No.
As the interest rate gets inverse, as interest rates go up, our liability goes down, their payout.
Oh, I thought our calculation worked the other way.
It's inverse.
Okay,
It works backwards.
all right. I have nothing else to
Continue. The 2% fund, work's been ongoing. There's on the council agenda next Tuesday. Facilities director will be coming forward, seeking permission to buy the 2 units. With projected surplus funds this year, we're going to be coming back at your September meeting, first council meeting in September, and then your meeting in September. So just before we turn the documents over to the auditors, requesting to use a little bit of that surplus. Talked about this as capital funding. One of the items we're going to look at is to ask for a transfer of $50,000 to install the 2 units on the top of the meet. So you recall the 2% fund from last year was to purchase and install 1 unit. When Doug, who's the facilities director, went out, he found that he was actually able to take for that amount of money. He was actually able to purchase both units for the week. So taking the additional $50,000, supplementing with his crew, excuse me, they can actually purchase and install both units and put the HVAC matter to bed for a number of years. I think it's a prudent thing for the town rather than trying to do one through surplus each time. We can $50,000, take care of all.
What's the status for using some of that COVID money for that?
Uh,
Or air quality?
Well, yeah, it certainly could be considered for that. We certainly could use it. That's definitely an option. The work would not be done until next summer, so it could be incorporated as part of the discussions. And in the event you were to transfer the money over and then say, you know what, we're gonna use COVID money, you could also move the money right back. Just because the money is put into the project fund, you can take money back from a capital project fund just as easily as putting it in, unless of course we can spend it. Jim's Walk fire truck. You can't take it
Well,
back.
I know we got fire equipment in this stuff, so that's.
And I think that
That leads to my next question, the COVID money. Have we got any kind of guidance as far as to how much of it we can use for safety equipment? I mean, there was some talk of possibly being able to use it for things like fire equipment.
what I have heard thus far is that probably doesn't qualify, but there's still a lot of, I would say at least once or twice a week, I'm getting information from different groups, different interpretation. Most recently, I got a notice from the White House. OPM hooked everybody in with notices from the White House. And so one of the things they sent out was looking for people to target the money for disadvantaged groups and helping to fight crime in various municipalities, which would play into public safety, but probably a little bit different than, say, equipment or something. Stay on basically.
Well, I think for personal equipment too.
Oh,
There was something you guys were looking for actual personal equipment too, wasn't it?
We have a account each year and that's $50,000 pays for the personal protective equipment. That's everything we spend on them. Whether it's cold water suits, turnout gear, anything.
So maybe we can do something along those lines if they want to.
That would be something different. I thought you were referring to larger equipment.
No,
I,
because the more we save on the smaller equipment, the more we can move towards the larger, so.
I still think that we should try and get the fire trucks moved ahead of schedule. I've verbalized it to a few of you, but I think that the timetables and given the status of most of the fire trucks that we have in town, we should push up the timeline to get those 3 fire trucks. Might be a popular opinion, but that's what I think we should do.
Like that for
No. And I didn't stay to listen to it either.
I didn't hear that. Sorry.
I will tell you that there are 2 of those 3 are in, they're not, you know, off the road shape, but they're in poor shape. One just went back on the road this morning, that's been off the road probably for a good month, because we had to have a valve manufactured for it, but can't get parts for it. Another one's coming in because the windows don't roll up. So I don't know if it's broken wire in there or it's a motor. If it's a motor in there, then I'll have to retrofit a motor for it, because parts are not available. It's just, it's one thing after another thing with those. Unfortunately. And unfortunately, they're good trucks. I mean, if you look at the history of those trucks, they're 20 years old. They're good trucks. They have served us well, and they would continue to serve us if we can get parts. You can't get parts.
Those are the LaFrance trucks, right? The American LaFrance, whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
But Kevin, when we look at doing some of this additional capital funding that we dropped out of the budget, how does that process work? Who is it that decides which of the items that we dropped get added back? Is that Rosha, you, or is that the council, or who?
Well, what will happen initially is, Arosh and I've already had some preliminary discussions, come up with a list of things. During August, Jim, Doug for facilities, Steve and grounds, Mike from physical services, off the umbrella part. We're gonna get together, look at that list, consider other items and try to figure out, based on where we sit with an unaudited surplus, knowing that we don't want to take that down to 0. That would just be foolish way to go into the audit. What would be a reasonable amount to ask for? What are the top priorities? I just in individual conversations. Some of the initial items are still there, but there have been others added. I was talking with Woody, and he brought up Hubbard Pool. And it really is in a condition where we think about relining the pool. From a safety standpoint, the pool literally potentially starting to fall apart. So that's one where you start to say, okay, well, what is the future of the pool? What is the desire of that one? And if the desire is to keep it and continue to operate it, then that seems like a worthwhile investment for safety and recreation. So we kind of sit and go through those types of elements. And then ultimately we bring it forward to the council. If the council agrees that, we come to you guys for approving the transfer and moving. We would look to do that in September before we close the books officially and hand over our trial balance to the auditors. So that's why we ran the last numbers just today, invoices today. So we'll look at the last numbers, meet in August and figure out that list. And then come back for the first meeting in September. I think it's the 7th of the council, the 14th. And then from there, assuming you approve it, we'll execute those quickly and then hand over the trial balance to the auditors. If you don't, then there's still multiple hand over the trial balance as it is.
I would just ask you that for documentation purposes, when it does come here, I think it's important, at least for me, to know which of those things were in the budget, and those that weren't. I would just tell us that, or give us a little more background on the ones that were not originally proposed to the budget process.
Unfortunately, once we get the list assembled, usually it's Jim or Doug, Woody or somebody calling going, guess what just happened? And that's just kind of the nature of it.
Today's emergency.
Yeah.
Fire truck.
Anything else under the finance director update?
I don't have any, I don't know if you guys have any questions. I did share out, shortly after the last meeting, I shared out with the Board of Ed update, and I shared after sending this, the latest Board of Ed at that point, they have processed through some additional expenditures. So the net number is 408,000 as of today to be returned back to fund balance.
It was 400,000 last night. Keep going back into the fund.
Yeah.
The only question I have is, if you look at the expenditures for the total year, we have a remaining balance of $4 million. Just, you gotta help me reconcile from the $2 million of opportunities that you said last month. So could you maybe reconcile for me? So is it $2 million more of opportunities, or is it somewhere in between? I guess I'm trying to understand. You said there was 2 million.
Mhm.
I see 4 million remaining the balance. It includes 500,000 for Board of Education, or 600, but.
Yep.
Could you
And then
just reconcile that for me?
some of the purchase orders that were outstanding, the actual expenditures as we close it out came in quite a bit lower.
Yeah, I don't need it tonight. Maybe you can reconcile those numbers for me, so I understand
Yeah.
what happened between the 2 million and the 4 million. So, that's big. It's huge. It's great. I mean,
This kind of whoops you up.
There's no emergency, you're here, I figured there was some sort of emergency.
I just wanted to be here at items on there. Just to answer any questions. And there wasn't one.
Take a look at the new room.
That's it. I didn't even know they did it.
And do you have an estimate as to where fund balance will land this year?
The actual fund balance or how much we will contribute to the fund?
No, how much it'll end up being?
I don't, I mean, I would say rough numbers, if you didn't approve any transfers, 14, 15,
And that's before the 3 million,
no, that's with it.
14 after the
We
3
have
million.
about 17 and a half coming into the year. I figure about 5 million, you're taking about 5 to 5.5 million with the non-budget appropriations for the pension. And right now, if you didn't do any transfers, net, revenue offsetting the expenditures, I would say you've got about a $2 million good guy to fund balance. So net would be a $3 million reduction, of approximately 14 to 15 million. Very good. Those are rough, but not real rough.
Not gonna hold you to it.
And I think, general insurance, health insurance, both remain solid. Reserved well, I don't think they're over reserved, but I think they're reserved appropriately, especially coming out of COVID and the unknowns that exist there. I think so the pension liability is coming down. Obviously, the assets are being put against it to pay them off, but your number is coming down, which is always encouraging. And then capital, we have made investments. That continues to be a challenge. We talk about it every budget season. Ideally, as the debt level continues to come down and as the pension continues to come down and then hopefully disappear, I think you probably want to start thinking about a conversation around the debt savings and applying some of that towards capital to begin to inject some capital into the budget every year. So there's actually money in there without raising taxes. If debt service came down, you're getting closer to 2026, which is the year when some of these big bonds start to actually completely come off. It sounds like a long way off, but we just approved the budget of fiscal year 2022. So it's actually a closer, an inch closer to that. You can be looking in each of those years at $1 million plus coming out of debt service, assuming we don't replace it. Obviously, something like the community senior center would change that dynamic. Putting that aside, you could conceivably put $500,000 of that money into capital every year, $500,000 back to the taxpayers, and you could start to invest in some of the recurring capital, like the vehicles, facilities maintenance, and I mean, you've got a lot of facilities, there's over 1 million square feet of building space between the 5 schools, town hall, library, community center. You've got a lot of fields. Sage Park is magnificent, but there's a price to pay for keeping that up. Being able to put some investment into that every year keeps it at the level it's at. Just throw that.
Any other
Start to
questions?
see the light.
Anybody else? Any other questions, issues? Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
In favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. You all set, Dana?
I got you. Water department need a new truck?
What?
You good?
A little birdie
Damn,
truck.
good night, guys.
Good night, thank you. See you, Ralph.
Bye, Dana. Bye, guys. See ya.
Works out right now. We do.